the maturity as a community to hold that competitiveness in a bigger sense of community, that the person who is the most vulnerable, the person who it took everything they could manage to get out of their house, get on public transportation, get to the event without getting killed and called out of their name, doesn't then need to be assaulted by your heavy competitiveness when they get there. We have no idea what we've gone through to get to this place. Some of us have gone through some very burdensome things just to live to be here in this room. We don't want to do a journaling exercise with you and tell you all of our business, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a need to be sensitive to the fact that everybody here is not as hardy and as strong and as self-assured as some of us might be. So this is my challenge to you. My challenge to you is to stretch yourself to see through new eyes. Often, for years and years, I was the only one in the room, whether it was the only trans person in the room, the only black person in the room, the only guy in the room. I've spent a lot of time in my life being the only chocolate chip in the cookie, if you understand what I mean.
You a party chocolate chip.
We love the validation. I want to say though, I mean, that validation is important to me. When I was at the Eagle last night, because I was at the Eagle last night hanging with y'all, like I had some energy to do that. And I got hit on, which was fascinating, because my vision of myself is I feel like I'm the big, fat, ugly, nerdy guy that nobody sees across the room and says, "Ooh, daddy." I'm the one that you get to know intellectually or on a spiritual level. You think, yeah, he's so beautiful, I can overlook how he looks. That's my self-esteem. That's what I see in the mirror. Now, many of us come to our community with that kind of shame and self-loathing. And sometimes it goes away. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes it's the reason why we drink alone at night. Sometimes it's the reason why we make this event, but we don't make the next one. Sometimes it's the reason why we partner with people who hate us and treat us poorly, because we're so afraid that no one else will come along that would or could love us. This is why it's so important for us to learn the lesson of seeing through other people's eyes, because there's not one of us that we can afford to waste. Not one. Not one member of the community. And I want to be really honest with you. I don't like everybody in the community. I don't. I love the entire community as a community, but there are individuals who I choose not to work with closely because I don't like them. I don't work against them. If I find something that might be useful to them, I use other channels to get it to them because I want their success. But I know that our personalities don't work well together. But I'm not willing to throw anyone away. One of the things that I want to note, so my journey in doing this work was somewhat accidental as well. When I started my transition, there were lots of trans women, a few white trans guys, and there were 3 black trans men who I met. One of them was just an asshat. And I thought, if I have to be like you, I'd just rather not transition. He was like this misogynist pig who was so... I learned later that kind of arrogance and seeming just abrasive self-involvement is all about insecurity, but I didn't know that then. Then I just thought, dude, you're an ass. You were like, it's like you pulled together the worst manifestations of all manhood and decided to wear them as a badge of honor. And I thought, no. The other 2 both suicided within a year of each other. And the void and the vacuum that I felt in that was devastating for me. I thought, there is no one for me to look up to that also mirrors my experience in the world. And so I met Kyler, and the 2 of us kind of created a commitment not to create a big organization where we could all be, but to connect the dots with the guys that we met along the way. You know, if I meet Neo here and then I meet TK and they don't know each other, I want to connect the 2 of them. And then I might connect you with somebody else here. Because I got no guarantee y'all don't get along. So I need to connect you more broadly so you can find the people that you can get along with. And my commitment became that none of us had to do this in isolation. We might choose to, but we didn't have to. Since that time, I am so honored to be a part of a community that has grown to, our BTMI Facebook page has over 500 members from around the world. There are conferences and gatherings and events happening all over the country. Body Image for Justice in Boston, and the Black Trans Advocacy Conference in Dallas, and Black Trans Revolution in Pittsburgh. And things are happening all over the country in ways that I could not have imagined 15 years ago when I started this journey. Still Black and Dr. Ziegler played a huge part in that. By producing that film, it allowed a lot of people to see themselves for the first time. Before that film, there was nothing that put Black, trans masculinity in one place. If it was Black, it was trans feminine. If it was trans masculine, it was white. That was all that was available in terms of written or visual media. And so I give Dr. Ziegler and Awilda Laura, the producer and director of that, praise for being the glue that allowed us to somehow connect with each other and have greater goals and ambitions. So I want to wrap up because I don't want to talk for too terribly long. A couple of things that I want you to do and to practice between now and then. In any space that you're in any work, how many of you consider yourselves activists? Raise your hand. How many of you don't consider yourselves activists, but people in your community consider you that? How many of you are the only trans person that someone in your life knows? You're an activist. You may be an inadvertent activist. You may be an unwilling activist. But you're an activist. Because people are looking to you for answers. And they're not looking at what you say, they're looking at what you do and how you operate. So if you're the only trans man in a group, and you show up every week and you don't mention, wow, we have no non-binary people and no trans feminine representation, we need to fix that. Then people think it's okay to just have trans masculine or trans feminine people in the room. Because you're the example that they're following. And I'm going to use an example from Philly Trans Health. We had a group called the People of Color group, but it had all Black people in it. And I said, either we need to call this the Black People group, or we need to have some people of color who are not Black. However you do it, it's fine, but be honest about what you're trying to do. Because there's a way in which we collapse terms without thinking about who it erases. I want you to really feel that. We collapse terms often without thinking about who it erases. When we talk about trans people, we only mention trans men and trans women. We're erasing some people. People whose lives matter, people who don't have the same access to community that we do. Currently in the United States, we're not at a point where we're going to have a question mark on someone's ID. So people who are non-binary are kind of screwed. Every day they have to commit to an identity that doesn't speak to them out of necessity. Those of us who have transitioned know exactly what that feels like. Where is our compassion? I used to laugh a lot at the restroom issue because I thought, dude, just go pee. What? But fortunately for me, I have people in my life that pull me aside and go, dude, that's not a good look on you at all. You need to fix your mind on that. And I realized that there are people for whom going to the restroom is an ordeal. I heard somewhere that trans people suffer urinary tract infections 4-to-1 over other people because we have spent so much time trying to figure out where we can safely pee. That's intense when you think about the physical manifestations of our social challenges and what that may come back to do. I also want to say that it's really important for us to make more provisions, and I'm going to give you guys an aside of homework. I know we got a number of states represented. How many of you have ever gone lobbying to your state house or on a national level? Okay. How many of you think you will never do that, but I'm going to encourage you to do it anyway? Yeah, okay. I know often we show up, we talk about this, we want this and the other. I want to give you a hint. Massachusetts has a law in the books that allows you to change your gender marker on your insurance at will. I want you to hear me on this. This is really important. It allows you to change your gender marker on your insurance at will. Now what that means is, when I go in 2 weeks to get my pap smear, I call my doctor and I say, I'm coming in to do the thing tomorrow. She calls down the office and changes my gender marker to female, so I don't get a bill for $600. After I get it done, they change it on back to M, and I'm happy again. But some of us don't die. So you need to get your prostate checked. You need to get your pap smear if you haven't had bottom surgery. You need to get breast exams. We need to take care of all of our parts and pieces. We can't ignore that they're still there. We talk a lot about the ways in which we're mowed down, and we are. Particularly trans women of color and poor trans women are walking around with a target on their backs every day because of the notion of sexism that if you don't look a certain way as a woman, you have the right to be verbally and physically attacked. Some of us as men need to be standing up with other men, cis and trans, to fight misogyny and sexism. That is the proper use of our privilege. We need to be doing that. We need to be in the forefront. Especially those of us who are choosing to be non-disclosed. And I want you to get, still in our community, the black community, I would say probably 75–80% of our trans men are choosing to live non-disclosed. There's still work for them to do. They need to be at the forefront of fighting sexism with their other cis-appearing people. Because women, all women, trans women and cis women, are suffering at the hands of men every day. Every day. We have a chance to create a new manhood, and I think that's our obligation to do so. Look for where we're missing. Look for disability issues. Look for fat issues. Look for age issues. And age issues is not, we talk a lot about young people, but you know, some of us are older, we can't really get down like that anymore. I was somewhere in some conference, they said, well, everything is on this floor, but the elevator isn't working. And I said, well, you're going to have to give me a megaphone from the lobby, because shit, I'm not. No, boo-boo, that ain't even going to work. I love you, and I'm so glad I'm here, but hell no, I'm not doing that. I mean, I would if I could. I might get up there. But then you're going to need like an aircraft or some other kind of window access to get me out again. But I think it's important that we look at the ways in which we don't die and the things that we need to have a healthy, full life. Finally, I want to say this. My first thought when you asked me to do this, I thought, you realize that I'm not the poster of fitness, right? You understand that. And so as someone who is also a fat advocate, I want to tell you, I heard someone say earlier, I want to get in shape. Round is a shape, boo-boo. Some people want iced tea and some people want Cedric the Entertainer, don't hate. But I also want, I say that lightly to talk about the lookism and the respectability politics that we have in our community. It affects trans men and trans women, trans masculine and trans feminine people, the ways in which we look at each other and go, girl, no. What were you thinking? Being a man and being a woman, if that's your choice and you're in the binary, also means that you can be whatever kind of man and woman you want to be. Just because you're a trans man doesn't mean you have to be uber masculine.
Thank you.
Well, you know, and just because you're a woman doesn't mean you have to be uber feminine. You became the woman you were, and then you come to the community and we tell you that the woman you are is not acceptable. I worked at Morris Home, and one of the women there was a butch, lesbian, trans woman. And the other women there shamed her something terrible. First of all, they didn't understand the notion of trans women being lesbians. So I had to work with them on that. I was like, wow, okay, you're going to go remedial here, I can see that. The second thing was, they thought, why would you transition if you didn't want to be really feminine? But broadly in the community, we still support that. We still support that. Now, I love everybody in the competition, everybody that wants to be in the competition next year. But the muscle that's the most important for me to build is this one. This one right here. You can blend all you want to, but if your heart is not open, you're not an asset to the community. If your mind is not open, you're not an asset to the community in the ways that I would like you to be. You may well be an asset. I can't take that away from you. And finally, this isn't even a final. I'm going to say this because I'm on a run now, and I'm just going to do this while I have a chance. I need something from trans men, specifically. I need us to be more gracious. One of the things I've noted over the years is we can be so extraordinarily selfish when we transition. Everything's about us in our transition. Everything's about us in our transition. Often. And I've heard this from every place around the country, consistently forever, we don't really value trans women as women. They will always be a women with an asterisk to us. Those of us that are interested in women, oh, I'm interested in women, but only cis women. Why? I mean, I understand preferences, don't get me wrong. But if in fact it is your mission to be seen as a whole and entire man, how dare you not see a trans woman as a whole and entire woman? And that's okay, but don't let it be because she's a trans woman. We all have our preferences. There's a way in which we diminish trans women on one side and then embrace them on the other. They're not stupid, they're not. As we try to build community across gendered and gender lines, we have to do better. We must do better. We also can't judge each other on our parts and pieces. I especially want to thank Justice and Tyler for participating last night, because one of the things that I got out of that, because they have not yet had top surgery, and they chose to participate with their hard work on display. Because often as trans men, we're very hard on each other if you're not on hormones, if you haven't had this surgery or that surgery, if your body doesn't look this way or the other way. We're very hard on each other. That motivated me. It allowed me to see a time when our parts and pieces don't define us within the community. I'm not on the outside of the community. We've already figured out how to deal outside the community. We bind, we pack, we do whatever we're going to do. We try to get by. We grow whatever hair we can grow if we can. We paint some on if we can't grow it. We do whatever we have to do to get by. I'll tell you a brief story at the end of this. But anyway, within the community, we're still very rigid about who gets to call themselves a man. And I will tell you, because I'm very close to God. God and I are very close. We talk every day. Several times. It's not your job to tell someone who they are. If you tell me you're a man, you can be a 42 double D and wearing bustier, boo-boo. You, sir. Because that's who you've told me you are. And that's how I honor you in the same ways that I expect you to honor me. Final story. Early on in transition, I worked for American Airlines for a very, very brief moment. This was pre-top surgery. And this was the moment in which